Hello. Today we're starting our new series that we've called Experience Hope. And over these next few weeks in the lead up to Easter, we're going to be exploring what it is to be people filled with hope. I'm sure many of us have practical hopes for the year ahead. Maybe we have a hope to see family and friends again physically. Perhaps we've got a hope for an increased stability in terms of our employment or finances. And I'm sure lots of us, like me, have a hope just for some kind of summer holiday. But actually, as Christians, what we want to do is look not just at the practical things that can give us hope, but actually, how do we find a spiritual hope that comes from God? Some of you may know that I've been reading a bit of the 19th century theologian Jonathan Edwards recently. And one of his ways of explaining the different ways we can come to the Christian experience is by comparing it to the sweetness of honey. And he makes this point about it, that for some people they may recognise honey's sweetness from a place of reason. You might think of a scientist looking at honey at a molecular level and discerning that yes, honey is indeed sweet. Or you might compare that to someone else who understands honey's sweetness not from a place of reason, but rather from their experience of tasting it. And Jonathan Edwards, his point is that actually when it comes to Christian experience, we want both. Yes, we want the reason side of it, we want to understand it, but actually almost more than that, we want it to be something we experience for ourselves. And so over these next few weeks as we lead up to Easter, we're going to be thinking about hope, not just in an academic sense, but in an experiential sense. How do we bring hope into our daily lives? To help us with this, we're going to be looking at the ultimate source of hope, Jesus himself, as he's explored in John's Gospel. And I'm going to be starting us today by just reading the opening few verses of John chapter 1. So John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. And through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. And in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, and he came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only as a witness to the light. For the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children not born of natural descent, nor human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." And I just want to recognise that this is one of the deepest and in some ways most complex passages in the whole Bible. And I'm not in any way going to try and offer a line-by-line exegesis of all its various points. Instead, I just want to pick out three terms John uses to describe Jesus that might help us to understand and experience him as a man of hope. First of all, John writes that Jesus is the Word. In that famous opening line from John's Gospel, he writes, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Some of us may know that the Greek word John uses there for the term word is the term logos. And this has different meanings. I think perhaps at its simplest, we might understand it as a term of self-expression. In other words, describing the words people or God himself literally says. One commentator writes that when John says that Jesus is the Word of God, he is saying Jesus is the divine self-expression. And just to try and kind of pick that to pieces a little bit, I think we can understand 2 points from that. First of all, John is recognizing that in the Old Testament, God's words held a particular value. You might think of the opening to Genesis, where it is God's words of "let there be light" that begin and continue the process of creation itself. It's God's words in the book of Exodus that inspire and direct Moses to go to Egypt and see the Israelites set free. It's God's words in the Ten Commandments that give the Israelites a rule of life, if you like, that will separate them from all others in the world. And it's God's words through the major and minor prophets that continually admonish, direct, and instruct his people to live as he calls them to. And so when John calls Jesus the Word of God, perhaps part of what he's saying is that all you might have associated with God's words before, all the power, the authority, the direction, the love, all you associated with them before, you should now see in the person of Jesus. But also secondly, and perhaps more simply than that, we can understand our words as being the thing that most clearly expresses who we are. You might think of going on a train journey, and I know it's probably been a while since we've taken one of those, but where you sit on a train and you see all the different people around you, and you might be able to make some kind of judgments on the kind of people that they are. So, for example, you might look at what clothes they're wearing and be able to make some kind of judgment on the type of person they might be. You might see the books they're reading and use that to kind of make a judgment on them. Maybe if you're sat next to them, you might see what they're watching on Netflix and use that as a way to work out something about who they are. But actually, if you got to the end of that train journey and someone said to you, well, who did you meet? Well, actually, the answer really would only be those you'd spoken to. You see, as much as we might put all kinds of value in what we wear or what we read or what we watch, actually, there's something about what we say that reflects something deep within us, if you like, the essence of our very identity. And all this just to make the point that when Jesus is called the Word of God by John, perhaps his point is that that deepest identity of God himself is being expressed in the person of Jesus. So first of all, Jesus is the Word. Secondly, he is the light. 9 times across those verses, John refers to Jesus as being light. He says he is the light of all mankind. He's the light that shines in the darkness, the light through whom all may believe, and the true light that gives light to everyone. Now again, like before, there's probably all manner of things we could say about this. John, I think, is again alluding back to that Genesis story where God said, "Let there be light," and there was. But I just want to really make one point about this, which is that for Jesus to be the light means that Jesus is the one who helps us to see clearly. I'm sure we've all had that experience of waking up in the night and needing the toilet. Unfortunately, I have it a bit more often now. But that experience of waking up and being pitched in darkness and having to kind of stumble our way from our bed to the corridor to the loo down the end, it is sometimes a daunting thing. And that feeling of kind of walking through the darkness, even if it's a journey we know well, and perhaps being worried we're going to stumble over things or knock things over. But I wonder in some way, is that what life can be like for us at certain points? Where we feel like we're stumbling forwards in darkness. Maybe we might find things, obstacles that come along the way that trip us up. Maybe relationships break down. Maybe we lose our job or our finances come into some kind of harm. Maybe we become unwell or someone we love does. And these things can trip us up and seem to stop us in our path. And so when John writes that Jesus is the light that shines in the darkness, I think what he's saying is that with Jesus we get to see clearly. It doesn't mean we don't come across obstacles and difficulties, but rather we get to see them as Jesus does. This might sound a bit abstract to us. So perhaps a practical way this might work out came across to me this past week. I was speaking to someone who is going through a very challenging season. And I asked them about this and how they were finding it. And they said that one of the things they were doing is they were praying or feeling compelled to pray a famous verse from the book of Romans, where Paul writes that God can work all things for the good of those who love him. I'm sure many of us have heard that verse before. But going through that particular season, the person I spoke to, they said that actually what that meant for them was that even though life was challenging and difficult and hard, they were looking for the good that God was doing. Good for themselves in terms of what he was teaching them, how he was helping them and leading them, but also good for those who know them. Looking to see how God could bring some kind of good from their lives, through how he was working in the life of this person. And so I think practically that is part of what it means to live with Jesus as the light. That rather than looking at the things we face as being just stuff to get through, rather we ask that God would bring good out of it. So first of all, Jesus is the Word, he's the light. And lastly and briefly, he is the flesh. We read towards the end of the passage that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The word John uses there is the word sarx, and it literally means someone's physical living body. And I think in some senses this is the most extraordinary idea in all of Scripture, where John takes these kind of big, broad, billboard size concepts about the nature of Jesus. He's the Word of God, the self-expression of God, the fullness of God, the deepest, if you like, identity of God. He takes all these expressions and funnels them to one person in time. A person who was physically born. A person who had brothers and sisters. A person who had a job. A person who lived alongside people and ate with them and spoke with them and taught them and heard them and supported them. And what we're talking about here really, in theological terms, is the incarnation. It's in some ways the most beautiful and yet complex idea that all the fullness of God can be found in the one person of Jesus Christ. Now, we might think again, that's a bit kind of abstract. What's this all got to do with experience hope? Well, what I think we can draw from this is that for me, I think hope is when we do what John does, where we look at our physical lives, when we look at the actual physical stuff we go through and experience and live out each day, and we seek to funnel in all that we know and love about God. There's a verse towards the end of the Bible in Revelation where Jesus is speaking to a church and he says these words to them. He says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." And in a sense there, he's writing to a particular church. But I wonder for us, as we're all, in a sense, separated from our gathered church, whether that might be a word for us, that Jesus is knocking on the door of our lives, wanting to come in. When we're stuck in an overlong Zoom meeting and it's getting tense and difficult, Jesus is saying, "I am standing here and knocking." when we're trying to coax our children towards some vague form of homeschooling, Jesus is saying, here I am, let me in. When we're stuck waiting the result of our COVID test with that sense of anxiety of what might be or not be, Jesus is saying, I'm here, let me be with you. In the complexity of our difficult and sometimes hard relationships, Jesus is saying, I'm knocking at the door, let me in. And as we let Jesus into our lives, as we let him in through our words, through our prayers, through worship, through his word, as we let him in, so our hope for the future and for today will increase. So I'm just going to end by praying some well-known words from Romans over us. So may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit.